Good morning and welcome to AM Prime here on WESN. It's the start of another week. Well, technically the week already started yesterday, but this country celebrated Labor Day, and it really was an opportunity for us to recognize the work of the labor movement over the years to the point where we are at right now. But also one of the things that we should be thinking during that period, this period still, is the fact that we must also hold labor unions accountable and ensure that they truly represent the interests of the workers, but not for a today purpose only, but a tomorrow. And that's where it really comes into play, the whole idea of adapting the workforce in Trinidad and Tobago to be more tech savvy in certain respects. The Prime Minister, I noted in his speech, was speaking to the fact that there will be some level of redundancy in jobs to come, and this is as a result of technology being incorporated into the workforce in ways that many people never thought possible. But it is happening at a very rapid pace. This is a technologically advancing world, and Trinidad and Tobago also forms part of that. Over the years, we've seen where there has been resistance in some respects to the implementation of technology because there is that general fear that it's going to make jobs redundant. Many people are going to lose their jobs and just not simply adapt to the changing environment. But that's where I think respectfully unions have a very big role to play in terms of ensuring that technological advancements are incorporated as far as possible, but in that process protecting the workers, ensuring that all decisions that are made in the best interest of the workforce in its entirety and the output that is expected. Now, when it comes to that same workforce, it has a responsibility, those unions, to educate its members, to ensure that they even provide proposals, suggestions to the government of the day, because quite frankly, the government has been taking a very piecemeal approach to a lot of things across the country, and that's something that for many young people such as myself, it'd be very frustrating because we see the advancements taking place all over, and then we wonder what is taking place in Trinidad and Tobago, because we have the resources and we can do some change management because there are people who are open to the idea of, let's say, and I always use this reference, work from home, remote working, and so on, having days where you can be out of the office and still be doing work and it's still counted. But we have to find ways and means, models and templates that can fit Trinidad and Tobago, but also develop our own way of doing things. So as we mark yet another Labor Day in this country, recognizing again the labor movement and all its work over the years to improve the conditions for the workforce in Trinidad and Tobago, we have to be mindful that we are a long ways from where we should be, and we should be calling on all and sundry to really make those changes, to implement policy and legislative changes. But we have to produce suggestions. It's not just about sitting down and waiting for things to fall into place, but going out there, clamoring for that, putting forward those solutions and really seeing things through till the end. And it also means some level of monitoring and evaluation. With folks with that one, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we have a packed show for you, including we're going to be having discussions about stolen vehicles, what is being done, how can you protect yourself, and what to expect as we really try to get a handle on the situation in the country. The business outlook for Trinidad and Tobago, that report is coming out soon, and we're going to hear a bit about it. And then finally, the Gender Affairs Unit, because it has been in the spotlight in recent days when we saw the issue with that female migrant, but we also know that across the board, women continue to really and truly suffer at the hands of men, and it has become a very gendered issue. But that and a lot more we're going to discuss when we come back. Stay with us. This is AM Prime.
best birthday gifts are at dbesttoys.com. Shop for the best brands you love at the best prices. Like VTech, Leapfrog, Fisher-Price, Play-Doh, Hot Wheels, Barbie, Cocomelon, LOL, Baby Alive, Crayola. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 32DBEST to order. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
We discuss gestational diabetes, a form of diabetes which develops in pregnant women. This medical condition can affect both the fetus and mother, but can be managed to ensure that you have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby.
From the first trimester, there's an increased risk of miscarriages, an increased risk of fetal abnormalities. So these are congenital. The baby could be born with an abnormality.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to AM Prime. Now, it's no secret that in Trinidad and Tobago, there are a large number of vehicles on the nation's roads. That number has been disputed time and time by politicians, by those in authority, and so forth. Some say it's 1 million vehicles plus on the roads, it's 750,000. But the reality is that not all registered vehicles on the nation's, are actually functioning and working on the nation's roads. So to get that true number of how many vehicles are actually operating, it's a bit more tricky and a bit more complex. But one of the things that we are fully aware of is that it poses the threat, or there exists the threat, of you having your vehicle stolen. We've heard many stories, whether it's from friends, family, or we've even seen it on Facebook, that the issue of vehicles being stolen is not something that is new to Trinidad and Tobago. But as the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service tries to grapple with that issue, we were given some information recently that 691 vehicles had been stolen in the country between January 1st and June 1st, 2023. Now, to help us understand that information and to discuss a bit more about this whole issue of vehicles being stolen and what we can do to protect ourselves, we have joining us Sergeant Shala Julian, and he is attached to the Stolen Vehicle Unit. Sergeant Julian, good morning and welcome to AM Prime.
Good morning, Nikolai. Good morning to your listening public. Thanks for having me on the program.
Thanks so much. And of course, this is an issue that is very important. It has been dominating headlines and so on. But this number of 691, to some, it is a huge number. To others, when you compare to the number of vehicles on the road, some are saying, well, it's a drop in the bucket. Nonetheless, how is the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service treating with this number? Has there been any improvement in the number of vehicles stolen for the same period? Are we seeing trends? If you can just give us a synopsis to start with of this issue, where we stand right now.
Yes, Nikolai, I can. What I can say to you is, based on our data, we can see an increasing trend with the number of vehicles being stolen. I can give you just a quick oversight of some figures. In 2020, we had approximately 740 vehicles being stolen. In 2021, we had 761, which represented a 3% increase from the previous year. However, as we move out of the pandemic, in 2022, we can see that figure going to a large extent in 2022, the figure was 1,574. So yes, we have seen a trend in which the figures have been increasing over the years. I can give you some statistics as relates to this year.
Sure.
And as indicated, there was 691 reported incidents of stolen vehicles from January 1st to June 1st. Of these occurrences, 66% of the offenses were larceny of a motor vehicle. That indicates basically where there was no confrontation per se where the vehicle was taken.
Yes.
And the remaining 34% were committed through robberies. Of these incidents, we had 39% of the vehicles being recovered, which represents just over 270 vehicles. And most of the incidents obviously occurred in the Northern Division, which represented 34% of the overall figure of vehicles being stolen.
Yes.
Northeastern Division and Central Division came in with the second highest percentage. So yes, to answer your question, we are seeing a trend of increase over the years, and primarily so as we came out of the COVID pandemic.
Now, are we seeing any trends, or do we have information as to where the majority of these cases would have occurred, insofar as would it have been at the home of persons, of the victims? Would they have been out, let's say, at a party and they would have parked outside somewhere? Do we have any information as it relates to that?
Well, as I indicated, the higher percentage of occurrences occur through the larceny of motor vehicles. This would obviously mean that the vehicle is left either at home or on the roadway somewhere. So when it comes to in terms of where the occurrences occur, there's a mixture. To say definitively that it stands out where vehicles are stolen at home, as opposed to in the public domain, I would say there is a mixture. There isn't any big differentiation that you can draw on a distinction.
Understood. And I would have read that it's believed that a number of deportees may have been behind some of these incidences. Very sophisticated ring of vehicle larceny taking place, those vehicles being cut up for parts and so forth. Could you tell us any more about this?
Well, without extending ourselves beyond the point of, comfort, right? We are exploring all options to see wholeheartedly that this spike rather is as a result of the involvement of deportees and the use of technological equipment. We have no conclusive data to drive us in that direction. However, we are exploring all options, as you mentioned, being one of the options, but we are exploring all options. Just to hint, there isn't any major indicator to suggest that these vehicles are being stolen by any technological means. It appears from all indications that it's a basic, we use a simple connotation as snatch and grab, so to speak.
Got you. And we know that a lot of these vehicles, the parts end up in chop shops, as they say, and then they are sold, whether it is at a lot of these sales outlets that we may have set up all across the country, and it's a thriving business. But also there are persons selling parts on Facebook and so on. What I want to find out in terms of recovery, because you would have mentioned 39% recovery, is it a case that the TTPS is using technology, or depending on technology, to get these vehicles back? Is it through intelligence, or persons coming forward and giving information to this effect? How is it that the TTPS is able to even achieve that 39% recovery rate?
Well, it's a combination of approaches. As you know, we have a cyber and social media unit, They are instrumental in many ways. But what we do, we primarily seek the information from members of the public, seeing simply because they have a better oversight, being eyes and ears on the ground. So a lot of the information does come through our hotlines of 555, 800 tips, and even in the instances, persons are able to call the office at 627-0729. So there's a number of different avenues from which the information comes to us in order for us to achieve the recovery percentage, as I mentioned.
Understood. Now, I want you, if possible, to walk me through, and of course our viewers, the process that usually is undertaken by the TTPS. Let's say, for instance, it is at 10 p.m. at night. You have exited your home. You've realized that your vehicle is not there. You usually park on the road. You make the call to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, whether it is 555 or directly using other numbers. But you get through to 555. You make that report. What happens from then onward?
Okay, so the response would be determined obviously by the measure of security you have put in place. You as the homeowner or the motor vehicle owner, right? Basically, upon the call being made, that information is transmitted at all points. Bulletin is sent to all divisions, all stations, and at that juncture, there is a search in play to locate that vehicle. Now, obviously, at the point of occurrence, important information may be available. So officers would make contact with that homeowner or victim, and hopefully there is some measure of systems in place as we advise persons to park in a well-lit area where they in alignment with a functional camera that could aid us in at least identifying number of suspects, identifying possibly if a vehicle, secondary vehicle was used in dropping off the assailants. We ask that persons have fitted within the vehicle some measure of GPS tracking, and all these elements assist us in progressing in a quick fashion to recover those vehicles. Obviously, there are certain areas we are familiar with where vehicles are rest to cool off, so to speak, sometimes in the hospitals, in the malls, etc. So, officers would make patrols in those areas, checking the various hotspots to ensure that the vehicle isn't left at those locations. So it's a collective approach where all division stations basically jump into action with respect to this stolen vehicle.
Understood. Now, technology is so very important, and even the TTPS, I have noticed, urging persons to put those kinds of GPS tracking devices in their vehicles and so on. Of course, this is a cost that would come to the owner, but it's part of, I guess, securing your vehicle. Can you explain to us the interplay between the TTPS and, let's say, these companies that provide that kind of service? Is it usually seamless? Is it that, at the time, 10 p.m. or what have you, and I'm asking because I am not familiar, but 10 p.m. this has occurred, the call is made to the TTPS. At what point or how exactly do these GPS tracking services, whether it's a personal GPS tracking service or they're part of a company that provides that service, how is the interplay there? How quickly is information turned over and so on?
Again, it would be dependent on the point of occurrence. It's all dependent on how quick that victim is able to communicate his or her loss. Once that is brought into action and there is GPS involved, for instance, if they have an external provider, that external, we usually have a close connection with some of the providers. Okay. So communication would be made directly to someone at the stolen vehicles. And even if that cannot be afforded, communication to any station closest to where the GPS signal is shown to cause a response to be made. There are instances where persons have private GPS systems installed in their vehicles, so they are able to track it for themselves. And in those instances, obviously, in communicating with the police, they will be able to provide real-time information, and the police would be able to act on it.
Sure. And what exactly is the message to citizens at this point who are concerned about their vehicle being stolen? They feel as though, and I know that the TIDA is apparently a vehicle that is highly sought after. So there may be that TIDA owner and so on who might be looking on a bit concerned, worried, or a parent who knows their child has that kind of vehicle. What advice is the TTPS giving to citizens to calm fears, but also to be proactive as it relates to this issue?
There are a number of tips that can be afforded in order to achieve or minimize a person being, a victim of this type of occurrence. We suggest that, well, for me, I suggest in 3 categories, basically. In the first instance, I would suggest that persons be cautious of their environment, and more importantly, their decision making, right? Too often you find relaxed scenarios where persons leave keys unattended in vehicles' ignition. Don't leave spare keys in your vehicle or easily accessible through windows and doors at home. Always ensure you completely lock your vehicle after you leave it. When parking, try and park in busy and well-lit and familiar places. Pay attention when leaving and returning to your destination. Be mindful of suspicious persons who may be lurking in and around your destination. We advise persons, obviously, that at home, park within a fenced area if it's possible, in direct alignment with a functional camera. And this may seem simple, but yet it is effective. We advise persons who are socializing primarily for the party areas such as Peter Avenue.
Yes.
When socializing, we kind of advise persons that they should try and carpool. Sometimes you have four friends going out and they may go with 4 different vehicles. So we advise that they try and carpool to obviously avoid a larger volume, the risk of a car theft. Right? In the instance where a vehicle is parked some distance away where you're socializing, we echo the suggestion that you check on your vehicle ever so often, every half an hour or so, because I can tell you that it is important between the occurrence of the theft and when the police are informed. Yes. Because if the time period is a bit too long, it may more or less minimize the opportunities to recover the vehicle. And I can say that simply because over this weekend, on Saturday to be particular, we had an incident where a motor vehicle was stolen right on Woodbrook area. And because we had a quick response, because the information came to the police, we currently have 5 persons in custody. Vehicle was recovered, and that inquiry is ongoing. So I say that it is important that we have a short time frame from when the vehicle is stolen to the point of us getting the information and being able to respond.
Understood.
Another scenario persons can consider is to outfit their vehicle with some measure of security. As we spoke about earlier, the GPS is a more popular option. There are other methods that could be employed, such as the shift lock or the steering lock. There are interior monitoring systems which could obviously send an alert to the window where the vehicle is broken into. And somewhat of an unconventional method is where we have seen persons coming together in communities such as Balsain and the use of the air horn, which thwarted the efforts of suspected car thieves. And again, we say these incidents may seem these approaches may seem simple, but I can say to you that they are effective.
Understood.
Right?
Now, there's a question that had been looming in my mind for some time, and I'm sure because these kinds of discussions take place all around, people may be curious. Has the TTPS identified any instances, or is it unusual or usual for persons to report their vehicles stolen, and then upon searches and so forth, the TTPS has come to the conclusion that this person may have been let's say pretending or giving misinformation to the police, and it turns out that that vehicle is not in fact stolen, but it is an approach to, let's say, get insurance money, whatever it is. Because we hear these conversations. Has any trend at all emerged, or has the TTPS has any data on this?
Also, Nikolai, personally, I have not encountered or heard of any instances surrounding that scenario. But what I can say is, on many occasions, you have persons who may be either intoxicated or absent-minded, and they would have parked their vehicles in locations and would have subtly forgotten where that location was.
Yes. And
obviously, you ignited the services of the police, and diligent checks would be instituted, and eventually the vehicle would have been parked right where you left it. So those are more likely the incidents that we would have occurred, and it happens regularly.
Okay. And final question. We have spoken about understood that this is an issue, the number of vehicles, the trends, the areas in which they're taking place, and so forth. We've given advice in terms of what persons can do to secure. We've spoken about the process as well. But one of the things is that I think is very important. What kinds of solutions are being put in place to address this from really a holistic standpoint that the TTPS may be aware of? Because let's say the fact that these sellers of parts and stuff may not be regulated enough, so it's difficult for the TTPS to go in and recognize that this part is from a vehicle that was in fact stolen, because there is a demand, is what I want to get at. And clearly persons feel as though they can get away with this, and they are getting away with it in some instances. What can be done, or what should be done to kind of close the gaps, or to provide greater support to the TTPS to ensure that these things don't happen in the first place?
Interesting point, and one that is, I would say, close to the heart of the Stolen Vehicles Squad, because we interact with the investigations at length, and we are able to see some trends and some patterns occurring. And as you alluded, when you look at the issue of stolen vehicles and how common it is occurring, you must accept that it is a well-thought-out enterprise.
Yes.
And we see that the criminal element may be utilizing loopholes in order to, progress their trade, right? To this end, I can say that the TTPS has reevaluated its approach to investigations. And in that, we have partnered with key stakeholders, the licensing authority, customs and excise, and particularly insurance companies.
Yes.
Right? And platforms such as this would allow us to speak directly to that third pillar of stakeholder, which is members of the public. If you would allow me, I would just want to go through some legislation that we have found useful towards aiding us in this direction. So we have identified that one of the key purpose behind stolen vehicles, the occurrence of stolen vehicles, is resale on the local market, right? What we are seeing is that when a vehicle is involved in a serious accident, the owner and the insurance company fail with the requirements of law to inform the licensing authority whether this vehicle is classified as a total loss, or as we call it in local parlance, write-off, right? Yes. So this occurrence allows the criminal element to use the avenue to steal a similar make and model of vehicle and mask that stolen vehicle as the one considered written off. Vehicles in these circumstances can be easily restored from the local market to innocent or carefree persons. Right? So what is concerning with that is that if we look at the requirements under law, we are seeing that under section 15, 1 and 2 of the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, it requires vehicle owners to report to the licensing authority where their vehicle has been destroyed. It says the owner of a motor vehicle which has been destroyed, rendered permanently unserviceable, and has been permanently removed from Trinidad and Tobago shall notify the licensing authority in writing within 1 month.
Yes.
Now, I am saying to you that this doesn't happen. And because of this, the vehicle passes from one hand to the other in its crash form until it reaches the criminal element who chooses to remove the information of that vehicle, be it the chassis and other parts, and steal another vehicle, replace, and that vehicle presents on the road as a normal vehicle.
Yes.
But remarkable to know is that all of this occurs without another requirement in law. Section 19 of the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act speaks to where a motor vehicle changes possession other than by death, the vehicle must be transferred within 7 days. So again, we have members of the public who would sell vehicles and fail to transfer it. In these scenarios, particularly is our concern, because you have sometimes when the inquiry leads, you have probably the vehicle to be class 5 and 6 hands without the records at licensing authority reflecting that.
Understood.
So in essence, we are saying that members of the public, as well as the insurance companies, play a very much important part in helping to clog the flow of these occurrences, so that the criminal element wouldn't have a bedding, so to speak, in order to lay the criminal enterprise.
Yes. Now, I promised that was my last question, but a final one because we do have to close. Usually when the TTPS comes across these parts, let's say it's in the instance where it's not an engine with a chassis number, it's some other part or so forth, because of that big sting operation that was conducted not too long ago. What usually happens with the parts thereafter if they can't be located, if the owner can't really be matched to the parts? Are these things usually destroyed, or what happens with them?
Unfortunately, the parts remain in storage. Unfortunately, if they can't be located, the owners, that is, can't come forward to identify. They remain in storage. If I could just give one little indicator, sure. What we advise members of the public as well is find some strategic way of identifying parts of your vehicle. And when I say that, I mean there are unique ways persons can mark parts of their vehicle, which helps us at times to bring forth, conclusive identification. Gotcha. So not to the naked eye, but you can find a method, you can find a way to place some strategic markings on your vehicle.
Gotcha. Well, Sergeant Julian, let me thank you so much. I think that the information discussed this morning was very useful, and I'm hoping that our viewers take away a lot from it. And kudos to the TTPS and the Stolen Vehicle Unit, especially for the work that they're doing in these challenging times. And I do hope that we see some downturn in these trends to the benefit of the citizens of this country. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Nikolai, for having me. You all stay safe.
Yes. And it was wonderful to have that conversation. Of course, very insightful. And that was Sergeant Charlotte Julian of the Stolen Vehicle Unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Folks, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking business in Trinidad and Tobago, and what we can look forward to. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
The The best laptops and tablets are at dbesttoys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch Ultra Slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order or visit us in-store at Forces Flagship Mac Bean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
We discuss gestational diabetes, a form of diabetes which develops in pregnant women. This medical condition can affect both the fetus and mother, but can be managed to ensure that you have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby.
From the first trimester, there's an increased risk of miscarriages, an increased risk of fetal abnormalities. So these are congenital. The baby could be born with an abnormality.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
You all have bombarded me on social media, you all have messaged on my phone, you all have constantly sent me text, emails, and so forth to invite this next guest.
It's the mother of all episodes. Join Sule Joseph as he chats with Dr. Winnet Joseph,
AKA my mother, AKA the grandchildren demander.
Don't miss this all-new episode of Sight, Thursday 22nd June at 11 a.m. Only on WESN Content Capital.
Ridiculous.
Welcome back to AM Prime, and as promised, we're now going to be discussing business across Trinidad and Tobago and the outlook for business in 2023, because we always talk about the business sector, talking about room for improvement, but also recognizing and celebrating a number of wins, and that redounds to the benefit of all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. But we have with us the Trade and Business Development Manager of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce, Rihanna Paul, to help me understand the Business Outlook 2023. Its launch coming up soon, and of course get into all of those details and as why you should be concerned as a citizen with the information that comes out there. Rihanna, good morning and welcome to AM Prime.
Good morning, Nikolai. Thank you for having us on this morning.
Thank you so much for joining us, because we talk quite often in many spaces and places about data and information and the importance, especially as we move Trinidad and Tobago forward. We're seeking to move from developing to developed, and of course data is king when it comes to that. Help us to understand a bit more about the outlook, because this is an annual report that would be put out. What is this document all about? How does it redound to the benefit of citizens and to the business sector?
All right, sure. Just to clarify, it's not a report per se, it's an event, a forum that we host yearly. This is the 5th installment of the Business Outlook event, which will be held on Tuesday, the 27th of June at the Hyatt Regency. And what it really is, it's industry leaders coming together from key industries in our economy to present their perspectives and their projections for the medium to long term. So we would have seen the recent monetary policy report come out of the central bank that, showed us certain indicators in terms of the energy exports have been falling. So we do have someone from the energy sector, Mr. Daniel DeVoe from Shell, who will be coming to speak to us about what they are seeing, what are the plans, what are the projections and projects on the horizon that can help bolster our energy sector. as well as take a look at the energy transition, which is very important right now, not only for our energy export markets and where the energy transition acceleration is happening in those markets, but also where TNT is at with our energy transition, where we need to be, where we need to go.
Yes.
So we would also, in terms of talking about exports, we can't understate the impact of our manufacturing sector. Very important. As we see energy exports fall, we now have to rely on our non-energy exports to grow. So we have Mr. Andre Jaslow, the Commercial General Manager of the Bermudas Group, a company that has been around for 100 years, that has a wide presence in our CARICOM and international markets. So he will be coming to speak to us about the projections for the manufacturing sector, what is needed holistically as a sector for it to grow. And we know the Ministry of Trade has a lot of programs, the Export Booster Initiative and other things, but what is really needed from the private sector to encourage investment in these sectors and really get our non-energy exports growing to help boost our economy.
Understood.
We would have also seen in the monetary policy report that while some sectors were declining, we had expansion in some sectors such as the real estate. So we do have Ms. Joanne Travely from Terra Caribbean coming to speak to us, and it'll be really interesting to hear what she has to say, because coming out of the pandemic, we would have seen patient trends in terms of commercial real estate, that the developments have stymied or just put on hold because most persons were working from home. What are the trends they are seeing now in terms of commercial and residential real estate, as well as some trends in terms of vacation rentals? We have certain, the last time we did this business outlook during the pandemic, we would have seen some interesting statistics presented based on regional surveys in terms of vacation rentals and that type of thing. So, and all these have cross-industry impacts as well. We can see see the impact it's having on the construction sectors and those types of things.
No.
Yes, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to touch a bit on the orange economy, because as we talk about diversification and economic transformation, we can't leave out our creative and entertainment sector. So we do have Mr. Kenda Lexman from Ultimate Events, also known as Tribe, coming to speak to us about what they are seeing in their sector. And again, it's another important sector for businesses, because it's not specifically just about entertainment. There are a lot of cross linkages throughout other sectors: caterers, event management, suppliers, different things. So while while the presentations may come from key sectors, it really impacts all the economic actors in our economy, because there are cross linkages, and how this impacts your business is very important. So we invite everyone to reach out to the CNT Chamber. You can contact us at 637-6966, extension 1303, to get more information on the event and to hope to register.
So the event is taking place on June 27th, and it runs from 7:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. It's taking place at the Hyatt Regency Trinidad in Port of Spain. And as mentioned, in terms of the discussions and insights, it will be covering the economic overview, energy, retail and distribution, manufacturing, real estate, and the creative or entertainment industry. What are the hopes of the Chamber in terms of a real practical sense that this event and the information coming out from the event, those practical implications that may occur, that we may see following after? Do you all expect changes in the sector, and how are those things, if at all, if you can share with me, how are those things mapped so that we know the information is being utilized and helping to change the environment?
Great question, Nikolai. So one of the inspirations behind this event, around this time of year, we would get a lot of calls from members looking for insights or data. As persons, it's mid-calendar year, persons are looking to review their strat plan or enter into a new phase of planning for their strat plan. So they're looking for insights, they're looking for data. So that was one of the reasons we created this event. It also follows the mid-year review that's read by the Minister of Finance. So any changes to the economic environment that he would have touted would also be touched on a bit from the industry perspective at this event. Now, one of the ways we hope to implement some change, as we turn the corner, we'll be looking for the national budget announcement, the date for national budget. But what chambers of commerce and other associations we're gearing up to do in this next month and a half would be to prepare our national budget recommendations. So coming out of this business outlook event, we hope to gather some intelligence like we did last year in terms of what is needed to help spur growth in these industries, in these sectors. We can package that, with further discussion with our experts, and taking some of the Q&A from the event, we can package that into some national budget recommendations to submit to the Ministry of Finance for consideration. And hopefully that can help, map out the growth, as you put it, as we go forward.
Sure. And I'm not sure if there are any trends or insights that you'll be able to share with us this morning of the expected presentations. Now, you would have described what those presentations would look like, but are there any particular trends that you are expecting to hear, let's say in areas such as AI and what Trinidad and Tobago might need to do to really step up to the plate as it relates to that, the whole issue of work from home and how practical that is for companies. Are there any insights that you might be able to kind of tease us with, as you may be aware of?
Yes, well, that's why we hope you all come out, and you yourself, Nikolai, will be invited to attend and cover the event as media. Sure. So we do hope to see you all next week, Tuesday, which is just 1 week away. Yes. In terms of insights, we have asked all our presenters to include how AI is changing their industry. We have seen the use of AI in real estate, in manufacturing, in the financial sector. I forgot to mention earlier that we do have Gavin Jofield from Republic Bank, who will be presenting the economic overview and touching a bit on the changes and trends that we are seeing in the financial sector. So yes, we will be discussing the impact of the AI and the use of AI across sectors. Real estate, retail. They've had to re-examine their legacy system coming out of the pandemic and really with consumer trends and consumer insights and in terms of technological advancements. So yes, it is one area that we will touch on at the Business Outlook. So if you have an interest in AI technology, it's a great discussion for you to be a part of.
Understood. So the cost members is costing $550 plus VAT. Non-members, that's $700 plus VAT. Usually, aside from the business sector, have you all been able to pinpoint any other sector that may be very much interested and have been, attending these kinds of events to use that information? So, for instance, civil society, you may see whether even a lot of entrepreneurs or potential startups and all of these things, with people coming for that information. Have you seen any sort of big interest from these groups?
Yes, we've had a lot of interest from individual entrepreneurs who are looking to not only gather the information, but these events are great networking opportunities. So you have a lot of persons from different sectors coming, and they get a chance to interact with the presenters as well as other guests that are attending the event. Of course, we have all the major sectors across the economy, the financial sector, real estate, the conglomerates. They participate as attendees in these events. Like I said, we've seen quite a few entrepreneurs sign up. We also have members from the diplomatic corps that are invited, as well as key government ministries and agencies that are invited, as specially invited guests. So the networking opportunity is a valuable one as well, not just to hear the presentations, but also to meet leagues in the sectors or other sectors that you may be interested in this.
Understood. And my last question to you, because you would have talked about this being an opportunity to network and so forth. A lot of persons, young entrepreneurs in particular, would start up their business, know that they have to just go to Registrar General's Department, probably BIR and these different things. But I can say with certainty that there isn't that much talk among a lot of these startups or young persons coming into the sector to join a chamber or to get involved in these business networks and so forth. From the chamber's point of view, has that been the case where there may not be that interest, or have you all been seeing an interest, and how do you appeal to those individuals to come and join? So what are the benefits and so on?
Answer that question, Nikolai. The chamber a couple of years ago created the associate pay of membership, because you recognize that persons now starting their business, they may not be able to afford the typical annual subscription fee. So to bring persons into the chamber to give them access to our training events, and other benefits, we created the associate tier of membership. So it's a nominal fee of $50 to register. We initially introduced it as an incubator program for persons who were part of a registered incubator program to become an associate member. We have relooked the criteria. We have opened it up to startups so that you can come in and you can stay as an associate member for a period of 3 years. So the hope is that once you gain the exposure, that you can actually grow your business. So you can become an associate member for a period of 3 years. And we have seen quite a number of persons take up that opportunity so that they can get access to the resources that the chamber has. And as you mentioned, the networking. We also have several committees, for example, the NOVA committee, and they have an event coming up in early July. I would encourage SMEs to look out for. Our NOVA committee is specifically dedicated to the SME sector and in terms of developing networking opportunities, mentorship opportunities, and the training session targeted towards that sector. So please feel free to visit the Chamber's website and look at the associate member category, or you feel free to call us as well. I'll be happy to take you through it.
And I'm sure that information is definitely valuable to some persons looking on, knowing that they can actually be a part of the chamber and the route through which that can occur. Thank you so much for joining us this morning and sharing this information. I just want to reiterate to persons that this, the Business Outlook 2023, this is an event being hosted by the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce, taking place on June 27th from 7:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the Hyatt Regency Trinidad. And members $550 plus VAT, non-members $700. But could you just share with us, Rihanna, our contact information once again for those who may be interested in attending?
Sure, you can contact us at the chamber at 637-6966, extension 1303, or you can send us an email at event@chamber.org.pp.
Excellent. Well, I wish you all the success because this information, as we discussed, very important to helping move trends in Trinidad and Tobago and really shaping how business is conducted in this country. So thank you so much for your time and for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Nicola. We hope to see you next week as well.
Indeed. And that was Rihanna Paul. She is the Trade and Business Development Manager at the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Folks, with that, we're going to take a commercial break at this point. When we come back on the other side of 7, we're going to delve into some regional news, of course, but also that whole issue of gender-based violence to really get an understanding of where we are at now, what things have changed, what we can look forward to, and really to answer some questions as it relates to this issue and what the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is doing to tackle it. Stay with us. This is WESN's AM Prime. I'm Nikolai Edwards. We'll be right back.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit?
Yes.
What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive. It is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole. It's for all of us in public.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Welcome back to AM Prime, folks. Before we jump into our final guest this morning, we want to share with you some news that have been occurring across the region. And it takes us first to Jamaica, where health experts are reporting an increase in cases in lung cancer in Jamaica. And we know that across the Caribbean, we deal with the issue of non-communicable diseases. We do have our health challenges, but there is an increased number of cases as it relates to lung cancer. We turn to this video for more on that.
According to Minister of State with responsibility for agriculture and lands, fisheries and cooperatives, Senator Adrian Thomas, these measures will also form part of Grenada's 50th anniversary of independence celebrations. Details on moving the sector forward were disclosed at the opening ceremony of the Regional Coconut Training and Exhibition at the Grenada Trade Center on Monday.
It is also opportune to look at the growing demand for coconut water as a beverage. The bottling and storage of coconut water for extended shelf life and improved marketability is an area needing further research and development. Consideration must also be given to the clusters of coconut trees that are populated with aged, tall trees, and the cost of harvesting the coconuts, and to select coconut varieties with shorter trees, less time to produce, and are specifically suited to the water-nut market with respect to flavor, yield, and ease of harvesting. Local and regional farmers are encouraged to consider whether it is viable to invest in coconut production and the byproducts. Explore whatever potential exists for supplies to both the regional and export markets in the US, Canada, and the European Union.
Minister Thomas hopes to see a major turnaround of the industry within a 5-year time frame.
There is a wide range of measures that could be taken, including improving access to planting material, developing a quality assurance system, improving pest management, increasing research ties to new niche market product, market research, and mobilizing funding for capacity building. Considerations could also be given to a Grenada Coconut Festival, a 2 to 3 day event around a coconut theme that will feature seminars and exhibition as well as festival celebration.
From all indications, participants were delighted to have had the opportunity to interact, sharing challenges and learning from the experts.
Very insightful, especially because we have many
many colleagues from all the region, so they have been able to share experiences, knowledge, what have gone wrong, what have gone well.
And I learned a lot about the nursery for the coconut, which from the doctor on messenger. So I'm very glad to hear.
It's a cross-fertilizations of ideas, and it all goes good for the increase in the coconut industry around the region.
The curtains came down on the 4-day exercise on Thursday with presentations from the participating countries.
And folks, that story was actually one relative to Grenada, where several measures will soon be rolled out to help ensure the long-term viability of Grenada's agriculture sector, with heavy emphasis on the coconut industry. But we're going to turn now to that story coming out of Jamaica with the increased number of lung cancer cases.
Health experts are reporting an increase in lung cancer cases, sparking a renewed appeal for persons to stop smoking. Shamala Pullen looks at lung cancer in this week's edition of the Health Report.
Lung cancer is a type of cancer that begins in the lungs. The lungs are two spongy organs in the chest that take in oxygen and expels carbon dioxide when you inhale and exhale. People who smoke have the greatest risk of lung cancer.
We're not necessarily smoking cigarettes, but what we're doing, which is a problem, is that we're using a lot of grabber, which is tobacco combined with the marijuana, and that can be a problem.
Second-hand smoke can also lead to lung cancer. In the last 5 years, there has been a 5 to 10% increase in lung cancer cases in Jamaica.
Catching it early, the patient may just have any rails, they may just be a little shortness of breath, they may have, when it gets bad now is when they cough up blood, because the tumor is eroding into the bloodstream. We notice changes in the fingers. We develop, the fingers take on a different shape. They have what we call clubbing. They have cough, or they have fever, and they are short of breath. Those are the symptoms. But I don't want my situation to develop to that stage.
And even if you stop smoking, the effects can be long-lasting.
The problem is we still have a smoking population. So even though I smoked and I saw the light and Jesus spoke to me and I stopped, the damage or insult that was done by that exposure is still there. So 10, 15 years later, I come with something on my lung that's new. And I go through a careful history and I find that you smoked in the past. It comes back to haunt you. So that is a bit of a concern. So one of the biggest things in order to reduce it is to don't smoke.
Treatment for lung cancer depends on the stage of the cancer.
If it's early stages with no evidence of spread anywhere, no nodes, or I can do resection, I can remove, I send you to my cardiothoracic colleagues, they remove the portion of the lung. Once there is evidence of spread, then it means I may still be able to do surgery, but then there's chemotherapy. And I would just like to add here that chemotherapy drugs are very expensive and they come with side effects. So usually it's handled by the oncologist and the cardiothoracic surgeons.
With your health report, I'm Shamela Pullen, wishing you good health.
And that report there coming out of Jamaica. Now, switching gears a bit here to introduce our final guest this morning. Recently, at a virtual town hall meeting on technology facilitated gender-based violence and its impact on mental health, which was organized by the Division of Gender and Child Affairs of the Office of the Prime Minister, one of the speakers, head of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Gender-Based Violence, Superintendent Claire Guy Allen, well, she spoke to the issue really being a rampant one, but victims being reluctant to report the crime, as a lot of them feel they will not be believed. So to discuss this issue, I invite her to join me on set via Zoom, of course, to tackle this issue. We have Superintendent Claire Guy Allen, head of the Gender-Based Violence of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Good morning and welcome to AM Prime.
Good morning, good morning. And the name of the unit now is the Special Victims Department, which amalgamated the Child Protection, Gender-Based and the Sexual Offences Unit.
Okay. So I'm definitely making note of that there. And we see where, I guess, of course, the experience, the talent, and so forth in treating with these issues are really being amalgamated, resources being put channeled in one area in particular. So good on the part of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service adapting to the issues. Now, gender-based violence has not been, well, has been around for some time. We have seen cases where at times the public will come forward when there is a most grievous act taking place against, in particular, women and children. But in 2023, we still have that issue, as you would have mentioned, about persons coming forward. Where have we come from, and where are we currently as it relates to this issue?
I am going to say that we have come a very, very long way. I say that to say, even within the legislation, when we look at legislation, the Domestic Violence Act was amended in 2020, and that act increased the penalties for breach of protection order. It also widened the scope as to persons who can, obtain relief under the Domestic Violence Act. For example, the definition of persons who are in a domestic relationship has been widened to include persons who were intending to get married, persons who are in a dating relationship. So it's not only just familial relationship only, it extended it as well. And when we look at the police service, we ourselves, we are not a perfect organization, but the formation of the Special Victims Department is, is a head in the right direction.
Yes.
For example, when you have a dedicated unit within the Trinidad, between any law enforcement, this encourages reporting. It causes victims to realize, here's what, I can go to a specialized unit and I will be treated in a special way. I mean, anybody going to a police station really and truly should be treated special with whatever report they are making. However, when you have a dedicated unit with highly trained officers, the service tends to be 100% better.
Understood. And of course, I would imagine that the TTPS and that department would be doing all it can to get persons to understand the relevance of the department, to understand the services that are being offered, and so on. Would you say that the population is receptive to this information, and that you're seeing more persons asking questions and willing to come forward at all with the information?
We are seeing a change in the narrative among citizens, and we are also seeing a change where victims and survivors feel that way, where they feel that they can come forward and make reports. As a matter of fact, because our Commissioner of Police have us operating with a zero tolerance to domestic violence and any violence whatsoever, what we are seeing happening is that although victims and survivors are making the reports, they want the intervention, but they do not want their spouses, be it male or female, to be arrested and charged. So there is intervention on behalf of the victim, but sometimes we don't have enough to take the matter before the courts so that perpetrators can be dealt with by the courts.
Understood. And of course, as you bring up that issue of persons, victims, and so on, survivors not wanting to see their loved ones, a parent being arrested and so on. But one of the things that goes into that individual's mind, I would imagine, is that if this person is arrested, that might be the breadwinner, that might be the support system for the home, and so on. What can you say to such individuals who feel as though they will be left on their own thereafter, and it's better that they keep their mouth quiet, unfortunately, as opposed to speaking? Superintendent? Sure. So essentially, the issue, of course, is one where persons, it's commonplace where from the time a report is made or so on, some victims get a bit of cold feet, so to say, and decide not to move forward with these matters, not to move forward with these issues, of course, out of fear, out of the fallout that may occur. And one of the bigger things that people have to grapple with is where would they turn to? Can they go somewhere? Can help be offered to them through various avenues? So I see that we have you back there, Superintendent. So back to the question, what do we say to those individuals and how would we make them feel comfortable enough to come forward despite the relationship that may exist or have existed between the victim and the perpetrator? Seems as though every time I'm about to get that answer, we're experiencing a bit of technical. I'm seeing you there. Go ahead. Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Yes, what happened is that I encourage persons to report it because there's the Ministry of Social Development, there are different NGOs, there are Families in Action, different avenues that help can be sought. Because when you do not report gender-based violence, what I have experienced thus far is that it happens with frequency and severity because the perpetrators, they are empowered. When they recognize that the victim or survivor would not report them, they are empowered and they continue with the abuse, and that can lead to deaths.
Yes. And I know that in recent days we would have had the some issues where some videos and photos of young women would have been released without their consent and so forth, and it involved a particular young man. And the question that I want to get to having answered, in those cases where there are the instances of that public embarrassment, individuals feel as though that's the end of the world for them and so on. But in terms of the kind of changing environment that we're seeing globally, where there are things such as OnlyFans, and some people are turning to social media, posting images of themselves for financial gain and so forth. How do we balance that issue in society where there is a demand for that kind of content, but yet we have persons who are finding themselves really being wrapped up into that without any kind of form of protection and so forth? So I'm not sure if you heard my question in its entirety, but I'm really looking to understand how do we make sense or balance the issue where you're seeing women becoming more and more objectified. We have OnlyFans and these public sites where people are showing a lot of interest in posting their content, but you have individuals who are posting content that they have no such consent to do. And publicly, there is this whole narrative of, well, people are doing it, this, that, and the other. How should that person, that individual think? Should they bow to public pressure, or is there a fight worth taking up to have revenge porn treated with or taken down or resolved in their matter?
And I think victims should take action, be it civil or criminal. Explore and seek action. But however, I want persons to understand that they need to take a personal responsibility relative to their private life. Sometimes persons do things, and what they must remember is that every action has a reaction. So taking nude pics is a no-no. I do not encourage it at all. Let persons come and see it for themselves. If you are in a relationship, I advise that. Do not be taking pics and sending it over the social media. These things can have very devastating and mental effect on individuals. Now, the persons who are sharing, we have laws that can, criminally hold these persons accountable. So persons just have to make the report and let the matters be investigated. But what you see happening a lot of times is that survivors are really ashamed that the pictures are out there. And some of them do not want to come forward and make any reports. But I am saying, make a report, whether it's criminal action or civil, take some sort of action.
Yes. And I know that there would be support in terms of taking up that, because one of the things that people think about right off the bat is, how am I going to afford to carry this matter to court? I can't afford a lawyer. I may not have the wherewithal and so on. But there are support mechanisms, if I'm not mistaken, such as the Legal Aid and Advisory Authority and so forth. I don't know if you want to mention some of the support so that person knows that they're not going into it alone, that it may not be as financially burdensome as they may think, and so on. I'm not sure if you want to address that.
Yes, it is critical that one takes legal advice. If you cannot afford an attorney, you can apply through legal aid. Once you make the report to the police, you would have a support network, victim and witness support, because mental health is critical and it's real. These things can really have an effect on you mentally. Yes, so you need to take action so that help and support can be reached to you. That is very, very critical.
Yes, and I know that some of the instances of cyber violence can include harassment, threats, stalking, pornography, phishing, impersonation, and the sharing of child sexual abuse material. So clearly all of these things are being covered across the board. But I want to now look at the whole issue of migrants in this country. I know that the TTPS would have recently had to oversee an investigation into certain behaviors or allegations being made as it relates to sexual abuse against a Venezuelan migrant. But looking at it more broadly, that whole issue of attacks against those migrants in this country, are we seeing any sorts of trends or any information data that speak to Venezuelan migrants, persons from out of this country who are seeking refuge in this country, being victims of sexual abuse and exploitation? How common of an occurrence is that based on the information from the TTPS?
That is a very sensitive question, and how I would answer that really, because the police, we can only speak about what reaches us via reports.
Yes.
We may know it is happening, right? But if you don't have a victim that is willing to come forward and to cooperate with the investigation, what can we do? The most that we can do is let these migrants understand that law enforcement, you need to trust us. Yes, you need to trust us, make the report. There is support mechanisms in place. There's the International Organization for Migrants. There's an NGO, La Casita, that offer that sort of support. So once you come forward and you make the reports, give us the statements, give us the information, and it doesn't matter who are the perpetrators, they will be arrested and charged once there's evidence. But first and foremost, we need the evidence. We need reports to be made.
Yes. And I know that in the last couple of minutes that we have, that whole issue of victims and offenders feeling as though, you know, this is an issue that is going on for some time, it will go on, and some people are just like, you know, you have to mind your business and so on. But if we want to take a proactive approach, because we've spoken about what systems are in place, what support is available and so forth, but if we want to really weed out this issue in our society, what are some of the things being recommended from the Special Victims Department in terms of, let's say, educating, so that you don't have persons, individuals feeling it is okay, males, it is okay to interact with a female in a particular way, or even for females to look out for certain signs so that they know to protect themselves. So I wanted to find out what is being done, whether from a policy standpoint, programs and initiatives, sensitization efforts that you may be aware that the TTPS may be leading and so on, to really help weed out this issue in our society.
Right. One of the things that we do is that we have conducted several outreach programs with some of those organizations that I mentioned before, the International Organization for Migrants, also the Living Waters Community, La Casita. Those are NGOs that deal with migrants. And what we have done is that we have conducted outreach so as to sensitize and educate educate the migrant population with the use of interpreters so that the migrants would understand how they can seek help and understand that law enforcement is there for them.
Excellent. Well, definitely seems as though a lot is being done, and I do hope that it is being received by the population, and that we do see some downward changes in these trends, because it is an issue. I can imagine parents having to have conversations with their children about these issues, workplace discussions and so forth, a lot taking place. But we'll definitely want to leave it there. As a matter of fact, as I want to ask you, what are your final thoughts on these issues affecting citizens across this country? Are we set to see great days ahead? Are we seeing legislation and so forth being considered to be put in place and so forth? And just generally, how confident do you feel that this issue would become a thing of the past?
This issue can become a thing of the past if we all put our efforts together. For example, we all have control of our environment and our little space. What we have to do is to let men understand, here's what, we need to respect women. We need to stop objectifying women. We need to change the narrative. So if we're in a circle where men are disrespecting women, we need to call out to our men. Yeah. We also need to let our women understand that we must respect our men as well, and we must respect ourselves, because these crimes are really a breach of human rights. And we must all understand that we all have the right to live freely and to live free from any sort of discrimination, crime against us, and to be happy in society.
Excellent. I couldn't say it any better. Thank you so much, Superintendent Claire Guy Allen, for all that you're doing and for coming onto the program this morning to share information, to help sensitize the public about what is being done and what they can do as well, not only to protect themselves in that moment, but really to kind of set the environment so that these issues don't necessarily continue well into the future. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us.
Thank you for having us.
Excellent. And that was Superintendent Claire Guy Allen, and she is the head of the Special Victims Department under the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And with folks, with that one, I'm going to say it has been another wonderful morning here on WESN AM Prime, taking you through a lot of the current affairs issues, having those conversations, and all really geared toward finding solutions, I would say, to some of our challenges in this country. We're just off of a long weekend, and we have a week ahead of us. Today is only the start of a Tuesday, but please be sure to join us tomorrow morning, Wednesday. Remember, it's 6 a.m. right here on WESN for AM Prime. I'm Nikolai Edwards. Do have a productive day.
WESN.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers?
Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best. I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on it.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Respect for European values on the part of Italy, because of course, as you mentioned, this is the first far-right government, coalition government here in Italy, the most far-right since World War II, and it's in stark contrast perhaps to Mr. Macron's more centrist positions in politics. And at that time, Ms. Meloni said such statements was unacceptable. And then it was very clear that things got off to not exactly the smoothest of starts, particularly on the issue of migration. In November, just a few months after her election, there was a standoff over the Ocean Viking migrant rescue ship when Italy decided not to take in the ship on Italian shores. Some 230 migrants were on board, and in the end, France was forced to take those migrants in. Frustrated with that, France decided to suspend its program to take in its obligation to relocate some 3,000 or so refugees. At that time, Ms. Meloni called such a move aggressive and unjustifiable. And these terms continued later on, because in May of this year, you had France's Interior Minister saying that the government of Ms. Meloni is incapable of dealing with the issue of migration. Such was the reaction to that statement that then the Italian Foreign Minister, Antonio Tajani, decided to cancel his scheduled trip to Paris, saying that these insults were unacceptable. So really lots of words being exchanged on both sides. But we've seen some thawing on those issues, particularly with the fact that the Italian president visited France earlier this month. And now, of course, Ms. Meloni herself, the Prime Minister, will be meeting with President Macron.
Professor Castellani, given what Seema has just been saying, what do you expect to come out of this meeting here in Paris?
Well, first of all, we know that there are some common interests related particularly to the finance, financial rules in Europe that are discussed, particularly around the Stability Pact. So on this point, there could be a convergence. And as well, in terms of migration, the position of the two governments are not so far as they seem. Both of them aim to basically regulate migration and to have a better management of fluxes of illegal migrants. So despite these frictions that you well described, what we might expect is that on the European sides, European issues, there could be more cooperation. Far more difficult on the other side is the implementation of the Quirinales Treaty signed between Italy and France, because there's not so much trust by Meloni government on a further integration of the two countries in terms of political administrative cooperation and as well in terms of industrial manufacturing. What we can expect, because the things are going well between the two countries, growing integration concerning defense and position within NATO, where the two governments are perfectly on the same sides in supporting Ukraine.
Seema, who called for this meeting first? Was it Paris or Rome?
Well,
what we do know is that Ms. Meloni is actually travelling to Paris, in fact, to participate in a conference on the International Bureau of Exposition. Now, that's the conference of parties, if you like, that will be deciding who will be holding the World Expo in 2030. And Rome has a bid for that. And Ms. Meloni is actually travelling for that purpose. Other world leaders are also travelling to Paris for that particular instance. But I think this question of a meeting officially on the grounds at the Elysee Palace are very much something that perhaps Rome and Paris are looking forward to organizing, considering they are hoping to press on the commonalities, working together on Ukraine, as we've already heard, but also perhaps finding some commonalities on that Quirinale Treaty, a treaty that was signed with Mr. Macron and Ms. Meloni's predecessor, Mario Draghi. So really not her in particular, but all eyes on this meeting also, just to see how things are going between the two sides, despite the fact that we've seen all these issues and points of contention in the last few months since Meloni became Prime Minister.
And Professor Castellani, again, with Seema saying there that, there's been so much fractious tension between these two countries. In your opinion, will there be enough goodwill on both sides wanting to seek common ground?
Well, I think that it's until now, there was a sort of diplomatic trap between two countries which are allied, but at the same time they are also competing each other on different fronts. So what we will test today is the political capacity of both Macron and Meloni to deal on a common ground. And for my perspective, European issues as migration or fiscal rules, or as well NATO support and development, these are all possible issues on which the two head of governments could have a common ground and could find common solution. Much more difficult from the perspective of Rome is further integration, also in terms of merging acquisition and as well industrial strategy concerning, industrial manufacturing and finance. We know that the two countries have strong ties in this sector, but the resurgence of protectionism and nationalism made more difficult to look for a common ground and a common development. And the same could be in terms of integration of public administration or diplomacy. So being realist, what is possible to have as an outcome of this meeting is a stronger cooperation on foreign policy and European Union issues, while the rest could remain, very cold in terms of bilateral relationship.
Seema, finally, just explain to me the importance of this bilateral treaty between these two neighbours.
Well, the Quirinale Treaty, which was signed by Macron with Meloni's predecessor Mario Draghi in 2021, it was really about restarting the connection between France and Italy. France already has such an agreement with Germany, and I think Mr. Macron, for his part, wanted to restart a close connection between these two countries, these two neighbours, important founding members of the European Union, and to get things off onto a better start. Mr. Macron often sees himself as taking a more European stance, a more centrist approach. One might say Ms. Meloni, for her part, representing a more far-right government, perhaps would not. But what we've seen since coming into power as Prime Minister, she has displayed a strong desire to function well within the system of the European Union. And as we heard the other guests mention, this meeting coming ahead of that European Council meeting later this month, it's a chance for them to perhaps get on the same page on those issues. And of course, that NATO summit in July as well. I think they are hoping to press on those commonalities. This meeting wasn't confirmed right in the beginning, but we got the confirmation from the Elysee that it was happening. So clearly there is a desire to move forward on the Quirinale Treaty, to move forward within the European Union.
Seema Gupta, our Rome correspondent, and Professor Lorenzo Castellani, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, moving on, and as parts of India experience a crippling heatwave, officials in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh are investigating dozens of deaths that some have attributed to the extreme weather. At least 54 people have died in Uttar Pradesh, while another 45 have died in the neighbouring Bihar state. Temperatures having hovered close to 45 degrees Celsius in recent days, with a severe power crisis compounding the situation. Andrew Hillier reports.
In the northern Indian state of Uttar Pradesh, those who venture outdoors do what they can to protect themselves from the scorching sun. Over the past several days, temperatures have soared, reaching more than 43 degrees Celsius. Almost 120 people have died from heat-related illnesses in this state alone. For some, it's become impossible to go outside.
It's been hot all morning. The temperatures have reached up to 43 degrees Celsius. The hot weather causes us to sweat and our skin becomes sticky. It's very humid and we can't even go out for walks in the morning. Now when we go outside at 7 a.m., it feels like it's already midday.
Hospitals have also become overwhelmed as families scramble to get treatment for elderly relatives.
The diseases that they already had have been aggravated, because with old age they can't tolerate heat. That's what may have caused their deaths.
Making things worse, constant power outages. It means that air conditioners and fans in hospital wards have been unable to function, giving staff no choice but to fan patients with books. Climate experts say extreme temperatures like these are becoming more common in countries like India. They've urged the government to be better prepared for the consequences of heat waves.
And staying in the region, and Himalayan glaciers providing critical water to nearly 2 billion people are melting faster than ever before due to climate change. As a result, they're exposing communities to unpredictable and costly disasters. The glaciers disappeared 65% faster from 2011 to 2020 compared with the previous decade. This data has been provided by the International Centre for Integrated Mountain Development. Now, he may have been out of office for nearly 2 years, but Boris Johnson's political woes are far from over. The UK House of Commons resoundingly endorsing a report concluding that he lied to MPs about parties breaking lockdown rules during the pandemic. It also means the former Prime Minister will be stripped of his lifetime access to Parliament. Alison Sargent has the story.
A near total humiliation for Boris Johnson. MPs in the House of Commons overwhelmingly backed a scathing report finding the former Prime Minister in contempt of Parliament.
The ayes to the right, 354. The noes to the left, 7. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. Allah!
The vote means Johnson loses his right to a pass granting him lifetime access to Parliament, a privilege usually bestowed on former leaders. The report found him guilty of deliberately lying about parties held in Downing Street at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, when Britain was under a strict lockdown.
It is clear he knew the rules and guidance. As Prime Minister, he was telling the country about them nearly every day. He knew that there were gatherings. He was there.
Over half of MPs from Johnson's party either abstained or didn't show up to vote, including current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. But some, like former Prime Minister Theresa May, urged fellow Conservatives to vote against her successor.
Following an unsettling period in our political life, support for the report of the Privileges Committee will be a small but important step in restoring people's trust in members of this House and of Parliament.
Johnson has denounced the report as the final knife thrust in a protracted political assassination. After stepping down as Prime Minister last summer, he resigned from his role as MP earlier this month, ahead of the report's release. Johnson has already landed on his feet, returning to his editorialist roots as a columnist for conservative tabloid The Daily Mail.
And that's it for this edition. William Hildebrandt, my colleague, will be back at the top of the hour with fresh news and headlines, so do stay with us here on France 24.
In 2018, South Sudan experienced a rare moment of hope. After 5 years of civil war, peace seemed within reach. But what is the situation today?
People are living in insecurity. You cannot go where you can work, you can get something for your family.
Some 35,000 displaced people live in camps, trying to survive as best they can.
When people enter in the war, up to this time, people are still suffering a lot. Crisis of anger, the poverty, and then the killing.
However, in Juba, some are hopeful for the future.
I think this is the only place where you can get all South Sudanese.
But this enclave remains an exception in a ravaged country. Juba Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.
And the search continues for a missing tourist vessel off the coast of Cape Cod in the United States. That submersible, as it's called, has been exploring the wreckage of the Titanic when it lost contact a few hours into the expedition. It is dominating the papers, as you can imagine, today. Diptyque Laurent is here with more.
Well, Aaron, the British dailies are all over this story. It's on a lot of the front pages today, notably because one of those people on board that vessel is a British billionaire adventurer called Hamish Harding. So he and 4 other people were on board that vessel where search and rescue teams are trying to reach them before oxygen runs out. The luxury expedition costing about $250,000 per head. You have a similar headline there from the British tabloid The Sun, which also focuses on the billionaire, but also the French diver and the submarine boss, who are also believed to be on board. Fears, of course, that the submarine could be trapped among the wreckage of the Titanic that it was observing could make rescue efforts all the more complicated, as The Sun notes. Now, you will note there on the Daily Mail that they do call it a submarine on their front page, and there's a really interesting article from Insider which explains that this vessel is actually a submersible, and there is a distinct difference between the two. This vessel, basically a submarine, can launch itself into the ocean from a port, for instance, independently. A submersible is launched from a support ship, much in the same way a scuba diver is deposited into the sea by a boat into an area of ocean to explore. So the submersible's location is all the more complicated for search and rescue teams because of the fact that it lost contact with its launch boat, so its exact location is still unknown, which complicates, of course, the search and rescue mission.
Glad you clarified that. I think I myself have been guilty of mislabeling that. Diptyque, well, that disappearance then is dominating some of the Italian dailies as well today, and they are also focusing on their far-right Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, who is meeting with Emmanuel Macron at the Élysée Palace today here in Paris.
That's right. This one, that submersible is on the front of Corriere della Sera here with this picture. But you'll see in their headline, they are indeed talking about Giorgia Meloni's meeting with Emmanuel Macron, which, of course, it's her first visit her first diplomatic visit to France since becoming prime minister. It also follows months of tensions with France over the thorny question of migrants. Corriere della Sera today predicting a meeting that will tackle hard-hitting topics like immigration, Europe and Ukraine, but also Rome's candidacy for the 2030 World Expo. Another Italian daily, La Repubblica, meanwhile, notes it will be difficult to erase those past 7 months of tensions, confrontations, silence and mutual accusations between the two countries.
Well, moving on now, French paper Libération today is focusing on artificial intelligence, not a particularly new topic, of course, but it is one that continues to dominate headlines these days.
Well, Libération actually is going with a totally special edition dedicated to AI on its front page, and to that effect, they've actually invited French mathematician Cédric Villani to guest edit the paper, and you'll see they talk about a whole host of things about the impact of AI on work, but also they look at the Chinese city of Shenzhen, which is often described as China's Silicon Valley, which is also becoming a sort of hub for AI, and AI is also becoming a way for the communist government in China to monitor, to spy on its citizens. But we know that AI does have some benefits too. We've mentioned it numerous times on the press review, and to that effect, Quartz has a very interesting article about how users are flocking to the live streaming app Twitch for a chance to ask its star AI video chatbot